Hey everybody, ronarray here, and as you already know, GG announced Path of Exile 2 0.3 Third Edict a few days ago. There are a lot of changes coming, and some of them are very anticipated by everybody, such as sprint after all, for example, which should make the game faster, or revamped trade system, which we waited for so long. But in today's video, I want to focus on balance changes instead, and talk about biggest winners and losers based on the all information that we currently have. I'm also going to share my thoughts on how good some builds will scale in 0.3 endgame, including my own builds too. Let's go! And let's start with a question that a lot of people already have in mind. Is Lightning Spear dead, or will it dominate the meta again? And right now Lightning Spear got nerfed, so now fires only 5 secondary bolts at all levels, previously 3 to 8 at gem level 1 to 20. And I would say that change is not really going to affect much, because the clear with Lightning Spear been very big, and 5 bolts instead of 8 is not that big of a nerf. However, no longer deals more damage when consuming a Frenzy Charge, is going to lower the damage significantly, because if you will look at Lightning Spear as it been before, you had a very good multiplier right here, deals 50% more damage when consuming a Frenzy Charge. That bonus will be completely gone, which is going to lower your damage by practically almost 50% in most situations. Because most of the time when you've been using Lightning Spear, you've been using it with Frenzy Charges. That way, Lightning Spear builds are going to lose something between like 40 to 50% of damage based on the situation and the particular build. However, considering that Lightning Spear is mostly a clear skill, so you're not going to fight bosses with it and you just want to one-shot basic monsters in the maps, mostly magic or even white ones, because even against rares you can use some different single target skill. I believe that losing 50% more damage when consuming a Frenzy Charge will not kill the skill completely. It will definitely be significantly less popular, but on a very high budget, I believe that Lightning Spear still will be playable and some people will play it, because clear is going to be amazing as it's been before. We also will need to see how GG will change particular supports, because we don't have updated information about it. And maybe Lightning Spear also will be nerfed through supports, because some supports been used for it before played a very big role on how effective it is. And that way, to determine if some people are going to play it and if it's going to perform even on a very high budget, we'll need to see the supports. But right now, I'm absolutely sure that Lightning Spear will be significantly less popular, especially at the start, because losing 50% of damage from just a Frenzy Charge bonus is big enough nerf to make the skill maybe not completely obsolete, but definitely not meta anymore. Now let's talk about the things that got buffed and which is going to perform even better in 0.3, and let's start with the Ascendancies. First off, it's a Blood Mage, and I honestly believe that Blood Mage been pretty strong and popular before, but right now is going to get even better. So Small Life passive skill prior to Sanguimancy has been removed, and Sanguimancy notable passive skill now is free to allocate, which is a very good thing, because you're saving 2 Ascendancy points, which is absolutely amazing. Life Remnant skills grant now spawns Remnant on hitting a target instead of critically hitting, so it will be much easier to maintain your life. The Gore Spike passive skill now grants 1% increased critical damage bonus per 50 life, and previously it's been 40. So that's a slight nerf, but I don't think it's going to change a lot, especially considering you're practically winning 2 Ascendancy points right now. And Between the Cracks notable passive skill has been renamed to Sanguine Tides. It no longer provides critical hits ignore monster armor, which is not really useful. Instead, it now provides gain 1 life flask charge per full life spent, 50% less recovery from flask. It now has when your life flask reaches full charges, 40% of its charges are consumed, and gain 1% of damage as physical damage for 3 seconds per charge consumed that way. That's a pretty interesting thing, because that way you can get even more damage. And you also will be able to utilize your life flask as a damage source. We will need to test that particular change to see if it's good or not, but it's looking kinda promising considering you have 2 additional points to play with. And open source notable passive skill has been renamed to Whisper of the Flash, no longer grants your curses have infinite duration. Instead, it now grants enemies affected by your curses have at least 15% of life reserved. And that change is practically huge, especially for bosses. So infinite duration of curses been not that useful, and a lot of people just ignored it and played other passives instead. However, 15% of life reserved for enemies affected by your curses is absolutely amazing, because you can still use curses as an aura, for example, or even self-cast them with big AoE. That way, you will get 15% of life reserved for all enemies around you, if you will just cast it or have them as aura. That way, it's practically giving you 15% additional DPS. It's practically the same, because enemies will have like life reserved and you don't need to deal that damage. And with that change, it will be especially popular for bossing. I believe Blood Mage now will be one of the best bossing options, exactly as it's been before. So even if the Ascendancy been popular and a lot of people played it, right now I really believe that most of the people who's doing bossing are going to play Blood Mage exclusively, because those bonuses are looking just amazing. And another Ascendancy, which is in my opinion is pretty much buffed, is Gemling Legionnaire. Right now, the Advanced Thaumaturgy notable skill no longer grants 30% less cost and 30% more attribute requirements. It gives a dynamism buff, which will active cause you to passively generate power and frenzy or endurance charge once every 8 seconds. The type of charge you generate is determined by the attribute requirements of your socketed skill gems. The higher the total strength, it will give you like endurance, dexterity will give you frenzy, and intelligence will give you power charges. I think those bonuses are pretty great, and it will be used in a lot of creative ways, because such comfortable charge generation is definitely going to lead to some cool builds. And the gem studded notable passive no longer grants you can use each type of support gem additional time in different skills, because right now everybody will be able to use support gems as many times as they want. But instead, for each color of socketed gem that's most numerous, gain hits against you have no critical damage bonus, less cost, and less movement speed penalty from using skill while moving. I think green right here with less movement speed penalty is going to work very good with updated Rhoa, which is going to give you movement speed and a little penalty too. Blue is going to make it exactly like you used it before, so less cost of skills you got from Advanced Thaumaturgy is pretty much just move there. And red, hits against you have no critical damage bonus, could be great for tankiness. But the main idea that Gemling will stay very versatile, so you will be able to go for Advanced Thaumaturgy if you like it, or you will be able to just take like Crystalline Potential, plus levels here, get gem studded, and for example like maximum resistances, or integrated efficiency, which is still working pretty great. That way I believe Gemling is going to be stronger, because gem studded been changed from just a pretty basic bonus that'd be nice but not too crazy, to a much more useful one. And Advanced Thaumaturgy would be a very nice idea for at least a few builds based around charges. That way, I believe that Gemling got a slight buff and it's going to be stronger than before. Another Ascendancy that's been pretty popular before, but in my opinion got buffed, is Lich. So for Lich, the price of power notable passive skill no longer grants non-channeling spells consume a power charge if able to deal 25% more damage. Instead, it now provides spell consume a power charge if able to deal 40% more damage. So that's practically 15% more damage in general. And also non-channeling being changed to just spells, so you will be able to play Lich with channeling spells a little more comfortably. And that's just a basic buff, because you practically receiving 50% out of nothing. And Eldritch Empowerment notable passive skill no longer provides non-channel spell cost and additional maximum energy shield and deal 30% more damage. Right now instead you sacrificing 5% of maximum energy shield when you cast a spell. And you're going to receive literally the same bonus. So not a lot of changes there, percentages changed a little, but most of the time if you have some energy shield, you will be able to get the bonus. So no changes for it. And the minion overflash never been played too proactively. So spell-based Lich received 3 bonus damage right here and no other minuses based on everything else. That way, I would say Lich is slightly buffed as well. And going over all other Ascendancies, I would say there's not that many changes for the rest. Smith of Kitava got nerfed, it's pretty much just lower percentages all over, and right here you will have body armor to grant 35% of armor to apply to elemental damage from hits, instead of +5 to maximum fire distance, which is pretty sad and it's going to make the tankiness less. Also, right here you'll get only 3% of regeneration instead of 5, and I think right now Smith will be less tanky because of that. For Tactician and Pathfinder together with Acolyte, there's like a lot of changes. I'm going to cover Acolyte in a separate video, and it will be pretty hard to say even if it's going to be like much better right now or not. We'll need to test the class, but generally I would say that Acolyte looking at least a little better. And Pathfinder, there are some nice changes, such as suitable practices right now will give you more evasion, some changes to concussions, but nothing too big, so I would probably consider just additional evasion slight buff, and concussions will just need to be tested. Amazon definitely got nerfed a little, and Ritualist received a small buff. So I would say the changes in Ascendancy weren't that big. Warbringer also got changed a lot. There's like a lot of small changes all across the board, and we will definitely need to test that Ascendancy to say anything in particular. Another popular build that people like to play being just Virulent Slash with Incinerate. And unfortunately it got nerfed and maybe not playable at all. So Incinerate has been reworked, and it now requires fuel gained by spending mana to use. It also not going to properly provide Burning Ground, so it no longer creates Burning Ground by default. Instead, a Fire Infusion can be consumed to cause it to create Ignited Ground. I honestly believe that maybe we will be able to find some workaround and make Virulent Slash still playable, but it's going to be a very big hit, and initially when the league starts, Virulent Slash builds are not going to be playable, because you will be unable to receive easy Burning Ground from Incinerate to carry around with your Virulent Slash. And even if the flash itself is not nerfed, losing the Burning Ground is going to make it impossible to play. So either some workaround is going to be created, or the build will be completely dead. So now let's talk a little more about the buffs. Lightning Rod got a pretty nice bonus with Quality change. Quality now provides 20% chance to cause an additional burst on impact, instead of meters to burst radius. Meters to burst radius never played a very big role, but that change for Lightning Rod is going to improve single target for bow builds both in the campaign and even in the endgame. Considering there's not many buffs across the boards, I honestly believe that bows together with good skills that we played before, such as Flicker or Wave for example, is going to take a pretty big part of the meta, because those are not nerfed and even improved, even if slightly. So Lightning Rod together with just like Lightning Arrow is going to be a pretty popular in my opinion and pretty strong. And another cool addition for it is Rhoa buff. Before that, Rhoa been just giving you a lot of quality of life, but right now Rhoa is going to give you 15% increased movement speed while mounted, which is absolutely huge. and it will grant you 80% less movement speed penalty while using skills. So you will be literally the same in terms of speed while you're using skills, or at least that's what GG want to do. But when you're not using skills, you're going to be 15% faster. So I think Rhoa right now will be a very popular option. A lot of people prefer that over Blink even before, but right now that's a very good idea to use it instead, because 15% increased movement speed in Path of Exile 2 is a lot. It also depends how good the sprint is going to work, because right now, as far as I understand, when you're on Rhoa, you will be unable to sprint. That way, sprint will be too strong, more people will just use that instead, and if sprint will be not too good, Rhoa will still take the part in the meta. And since Rhoa pretty often used with like spears or with bows, I think it's indirectly above for all bow builds that we currently have. And another nerf that I wanted to address is pretty much Infernal Cry. Infernal Cry been used for almost all possible builds for boss, because Infernal Cry been giving you a lot of free damage out of practically nothing. It's been used to one-shot Arbiter, to one-shot all bosses such as Zasht, for example, and most of the builds use that, at least for the bossing. So right now, GG changed Infernal Cry, and I don't think it's over, but the damage is going to be a little less. So before you've been able to get like up to 100% damage as fire damage, right now you will get only 50. And before you also had like 50% from quality, and right now you will get only 10. So in the previous league, you just used Infernal Cry for 150% of additional damage as fire, and right now you will be able to receive only 60. That way, you're going to lose a pretty significant chunk of damage, but I don't think it's going to be that. Most of the time, if your build been able to one-shot bosses with like Flicker Strike, for example, you will still be able to do so. But using such thing as like one-shotting bosses in the full party will be a little harder for builds that use Infernal Cry. I'm still going to use Infernal Cry for most of my builds that used it before, even with lower numbers, because it still provides a huge amount of pretty much free damage. And another thing that in my opinion is going to be pretty strong and looking very interesting right now is Arc. Arc is now its projectile, which is pretty good. It no longer causes explosion against shock enemies, and right now it chains a little more times than before. Right now it also will have 50% more shock magnitude, which is great for the damage, and can now consume lightning infusion to chain additional times and deal more damage too. So you will be able to get light infusion with different ways, such as like Orb of Storm, for example. So Arc right now could be a very good option for both clear and maybe even a single target. It's also going to deal significantly more damage, and you will also get like a cool bonus at quality, which will give you 10% chance to not remove an infusion, but still count as consuming them. So generally, you're going to deal more damage against enemies when you have like infusion, you'll deal more damage in general, and since it's a projectile, it could be stuck in a pretty interesting way, for example with Deadeye. Will it provide an additional arc? So far it can be confirmed, but there's definitely a potential with that skill, and I'm going to test that when the leak is going live. And on top of it, GG also decided to buff the Comet, so it's just going to do generically more damage. It's approximately like 18-20%, and Comet mostly been used for like cast on critical, cast on shock builds, and I think those builds should be indirectly buffed right now. I don't think it's going to change a lot, but builds that used Cog before are definitely going to feel a little better. There's also a small change to Contagion. Quality now provides 2 additional enemies when cast. instead of maximum debuff damage bonus. I think it's a pretty cool buff and it will be easier to clear with Contagion and Chaos Bolt right now. So most of the Lich builds, including mine, are going to feel a little better. And the last thing that I'm going to showcase is a Storm Wave buff. So Storm Wave now additionally hits targets slightly to either side of your character. It's mostly quality of life buff, but I'm absolutely sure that my Nuke Wave Monk is going to feel much better right now because it will be just easier to hit enemies. So I believe that Storm Wave will be a pretty decent option for the clear because it will be much easier to hit enemies and it's not touched in any other situation. So Monk is staying just fine and I'm absolutely sure that the build itself is going to perform at least as good as it's been before. Only Infernal Cry is nerfing our single target damage, but it's not a big issue. And as the last part, GG also decided to nerf critical damage bonuses across the whole board. So modifiers for martial weapons now will roll only 25% of critical damage bonus, and previously it's been like 40. Runes are also going to provide less critical damage bonus, and right now I would say that almost all crit oriented builds got at least slightly nerfed. It's not a big issue because I believe that we had more than enough damage with most of the crit builds before, but it will be harder to scale it, especially at the start of the game. However, I believe that such crit builds, for example as Monk builds or Deadeye builds, are going to survive just fine, even after all the changes. GG also decided to hit Warrior a little because right now it will be harder to get like block and the cap for block will be 50% too. It means it will be kinda easier for players that played without block because it's going to affect monsters as well. However, I would say that Warrior in generally will perform a little worse compared to the previous league. And I believe that meta is going to mostly focus on bows and spells, with a little spice of attacks such as Monk builds for example, and I honestly believe that with new changes to supports, in general most of the builds are going to be stronger than in the previous leagues. Because we're receiving a lot of cool